The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. PME live like I am every single Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. Today, we're going to recap Week 5. We're going to talk about the snap shares from running backs in terms of Week 5, the waiver wire pickups and biggest injuries heading into Week 6, preview some Monday Nighters, and not Monday Nighters, plural, but we'll also take a look at the Week 6 early spreads, see if anything hops off the page. Scheduling note for Week 6, I'm swapping the DraftKings show and the spread pick show. I know everyone loves the spread pick show. It's our favorite show. It's the flagship show. We had to push it back a day, so instead of coming out on Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., it'll come out Wednesday evening, probably around like 10 p.m. The DraftKings pick show, all of Davis Maddock on this week, will be coming out on Wednesday morning in the regular spread time. So just in case you're wondering where it is on Wednesday morning, it'll be out more towards midnight on Wednesday. Just a scheduling conflict, but hey, we want to make sure we still got everything out. Also, if you're out there watching right now, remember to smash the like button, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and tell me your favorite buy low target right now in all of fantasy football. You leave that in the comment section, not the live chat, the comment section. You'll be in a draw for 20 DK bucks. Other ways to do so: rate, review, subscribe, and download the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Give a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something like you like about the show. You'll be in a draw for 20 DK bucks, as you will if you follow me on Instagram at the PME. You heart one of those football photos that appear in the timeline. Just leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. You too will be in the draw for 20 DK bucks. The winners from Week 5, I got Boyer 27, Ahmed 345, Minshew Walk, good name, 26, MD The Dream, Captain Fun Pants, Hammerhead 13579, Nicky Noodles 19, M Panky 88, and Quick and Easy Cat. All the winners of 20 DK bucks. The money is not in your DraftKings account yet. It shall be later today, hopefully. If not, it'll be there tomorrow or sometime within the next 8 months. Either way, you won 20 DK bucks. Congratulations. If you're looking for the full list of waiver wire pickup and injuries or the snap counts at the description or comment section of this video or podcast, the waiver wire column is a living document all the way up until Tuesday evening. Then I'll update it after Monday Night Football. If any new injuries occur, what you see on the show today could change. Just takes one big injury. Everything could potentially change. Just letting you know that right now. So don't lock yourself in to everything that's said here today. Joining me for the first time on the show, a big shout out to him for getting over 10,000 YouTube subscribers. He's been contributing all around the industry, doing all the sports. First time on the show. I've been a fan. Sal Vetri, what's going on, my man?
Pat, what's going on? Thanks for the nice words. Yeah, I appreciate being here. Big fan of the show, and happy to talk about what was a real crazy weekend in the NFL, I'd say. Just people going off left and right.
Yeah, if you didn't have like 310 DraftKings points, you were not in competition for big money. I put up like 260, and I was like, oh man, I'm doing great. And then Aaron Jones goes off, Cooper goes off, and I'm like, oh, I don't have those guys. And now I'm just way behind and barely cashing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could have scored 300 points and won like every single other Millie Maker, and you wouldn't even finish in the top 100 this week. People were at me saying that they scored 200 fantasy points for the first time ever and didn't win a dime in DraftKings this weekend. It's crazy.
Yeah. Did you end up in like season-long leagues or even head-to-heads? Did you end up going up against like Will Fuller, Deshaun Watson, anything like that? Because I've really cut down my season-long fantasy leagues. I only play in 5 now, and I went up against Will Fuller in 4 of them. It was not great.
So I got really lucky. So I only play in 3 season-long leagues, or three and a half, I guess we can say. But it is Will Fuller in all of them, so I got lucky there. But I did face Christian McCaffrey in 2, so rough there.
Yeah, that's a rough start to the week. Hopefully you could have something to mitigate some of the damage that happened. Have one of the like 3 or 4 or 5 other guys who just went absolutely bananas. It's funny trying to get like the winning combination. You needed to have basically 4 of those guys and then hit on all like the periphery players who like tight end was almost like a barren wasteland last week. It's funny. I went all out fade on Tyler Eifert on all of my DraftKings line. I'm thinking I'm a genius, but it didn't really matter. Like unless you paid up for Ertz, who had a really good week, or somehow fell into Darren Fells, everyone at tight end was kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, that's how it landed. Like Ryan Izzo was like one of the best tight ends this week. I ended up going just all in Jimmy Graham 100%, and I played mainly 3 max single entry. But I had Jimmy Graham in every single thing, and him not doing well, like 8 fantasy points, whatever it was, it doesn't even hurt you because nobody does well at the position this week.
Yeah, it just some weeks it breaks down that way. You have to have the certain guys at the certain positions. You need to have Eagles defense. If you didn't have Eagles defense, I mean, maybe you could have skated by with Carolina. They were pretty popular, but other than that, like there was just a huge gap between the very top scorers at the position and everyone else. Even if they had good weeks, like even someone like Josh Jacobs who had a really good week, like you still had to have McCaffrey or it didn't really matter.
Yeah, what's crazy to me as I look through like the Millie Maker winning lineup, I mean, the guy puts up like 330 points. But the thing that's crazy is he has 2 guys that don't even hit 15 fantasy points, and he still does that. Like, that's the type of week we just had. We're probably never going to see this again until we do like 3 weeks from now, because this is what I said, week 1?
Yeah. Who were the 2 guys who didn't put up a ton of points for him? I assume it was a tight end and a defense?
Yeah, so no, he actually had Eagles defense. So I have it up. He had Jared Cook, who had 14 fantasy points, and then he has James White, who has 13. At 12% ownership for White, 3% for Cook. Yeah, these guys combined for less than 30 points for him, and he still scores 331. It's just insane.
So that means he had to have Deshaun, McCaffrey, Jones, Cooper, Fuller, all 5 of those guys?
So he had Teddy Bridgewater, and he doesn't have Amari Cooper, which is insane. This is the lineup. It's Teddy, it's McCaffrey, James White, and wide receivers Fuller, Godwin. So back-to-back weeks there for Godwin being in a Millie Maker, and then Michael Thomas, and then Jones in the flex, Eagles D. So yeah, it's actually remarkable that he doesn't have Amari.
That's nuts. I mean, just with salary cap constraints, it would be really tough to afford all of those guys. And still, like, Will Fuller was the clear, like, low-owned guy that you had to have. Eagles D, you had to have. And other than that, like, I guess you just could mix and match the expensive guys. You just had to hit on the right ones. But anyway, let's recap the week a little bit. Wow, what really leapt out to you? Like, we'll eventually get to, like, the Power 5 and rank the overall who are the best teams in football. I think New England's a very clear number 1 at this point, even though it looked like they were actively trying to shave points at some time, points against the Redskins, and it still didn't matter. They still ended up covering a gigantic spread. But was there anything interesting? Because I think you do the same thing that I do. You watch all the games on Sunday, you kind of absorb what's happening, develop some takes, then you go back on Monday morning and watch all the accelerated film so you can watch all the games essentially in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is just the Saints in general and how good of a coach Sean Payton is in terms of scheming players open. Like Teddy Bridgewater looked really good yesterday, and credit to him, but the guys, just how wide open they were, that's all scheming. That's all like an offensive genius in Sean Payton. So watching that game, like you said, running it back, these 15-minute sim videos that they have that are fantastic. Yeah, Teddy Bridgewater, he just had him looking like a top-tier quarterback. Again, the defense he's facing is terrible, but when you're able to scrap out 2 wins in a row with a backup quarterback, no one expecting them to win both of these games, maybe not even one. That's something that stood out to me. And then also just the Packers going into Dallas and winning. They were underdogs, and they end up winning by double digits and leading that game pretty much the whole time in full command. So those are like the 2 big points for me that stood out.
What'd you make of that Green Bay and Dallas game? Because it was stunning to me. It's funny, like fantasy-wise, like people were all gung-ho for MVS without Devontae Adams around. Maybe play some Geronimo Allison. You talked about playing Jimmy Graham. And even you could play Aaron Rodgers in that game. They all kind of did nothing fantasy-wise, yet the Packers ruled. However, the pass defense didn't look great. Like, Jair Alexander made some decent plays, but Cooper lit him up.
Oh, yeah. So, like, coming into the week, the Packers offense, the only pieces I was high on were Jimmy Graham. Like, to me, he seemed like the only guy that Aaron Rodgers would trust throwing the ball to, and Aaron Jones. And if you believe that Aaron Jones would be schemed into the passing game, as he was, they put him out wide, they put him in the slot. He has just a career historic day. Then that was really the only way they would move the ball. And that's exactly what they did, mainly just through Aaron Jones. So credit to Jones and credit to just the way that they schemed the offensive line. They had a rookie on the offensive line filling in for center who got hurt, Corey Linsley. They were able to just run the ball down Dallas's throat, who was pretty good for the last 3 weeks defending the run. And then, yeah, you talk about it on the defense. Jair Alexander rated number 2 Pro Football Focus cover cornerback going into last week. And Amari just lit him up. I mean, Amari left and right was just taking anything you wanted from him. Dak, one of his interceptions was just a drop by Amari, the only bad point of the game for Cooper. And then Jair just ends up with a pick. But even there, he got beat. So for me, the pass defense, yeah, a little bit concerning because Gallup comes back, burns Kevin King for most of the game there. It's concerning. The one bright spot for this Packers outside of their safeties is Tramon Williams, who I was on just kind of torching the guy after week 2, getting torched by Chad Beebe. And then Tramon Williams looks good, but holding down Randall Cobb. But yeah, the outside looked concerning. It was just a weird game overall. Like the whole time, it seemed like the Packers were in command, but they weren't even doing anything. It was just Aaron Jones left and right, 15-yard runs.
it was a really just to see Dallas end up like staging a comeback, although they ended up falling 10 points short after the missed field goal. I'm still not sure where to fall on either of these teams. Like I'm just trying to think of like where to power rank them as it pertains to the league. Like, are you worried that Kansas City all of a sudden they've been figured out? All of a sudden people are throwing man coverage at them and Patrick Mahomes can't do anything, or do you think they'll adjust to this? Because I still think they're very clearly the number 2 team in the league.
Yeah, I think they'll adjust. I actually think this Colts defense, which is just insane how they're down now maybe 3 of their best players, but down Darius Leonard, Malik Hooker going into that game, and they're still just so good. This is a defense that it's his own defense primarily. That's what they run. So they're not going to let you beat them deep. And they didn't even let Patty Mahomes beat them deep for the most part in that game. So I don't think it's anything at the Chiefs. Losing at home, maybe a little bit of a concern there, but in a big primetime spot. But this Colts defense is a lot better than I think people give them credit for.
Yeah, it's funny what you can do even with lesser personnel. Like you mentioned, Darius Leonard out again with the concussion and Malik Hooker in the secondary, the best piece of their secondary, more than likely. And then you have Frank Reich, and they were even showing the analytics department up in the booth on the NBC coverage in the Sunday Nighter. And you're right, like they primarily play a zone defense. And then yesterday coming into this game and scheming it, they basically looked at what the Lions did the week before, what the Patriots did against them in the playoffs. And like, you know what? Zone's not going to work here. They're going to beat our zone. And they completely switched to man. So the 3 games in which Mahomes has struggled in, basically over his past 10, have been all against this man coverage. I think you'll see more teams go to this. And it's just sort of a testament. Like you can make all these excuses for all these different teams. You lose this player, you lose that player, you lose this player. But Frank Reich has done an amazing job of piecing everything together. Like he comes in late to the season last year, and yeah, he kind of rebuilds Andrew Luck. He rebuilds this offense, and they lose Andrew Luck, randomly retires. They're playing down their 2 best defenders, and all of a sudden this team continues to look pretty legit. Do you think they have the top end talent to actually do any damage here outside of the regular season? Like you get the Colts into the playoffs, they might be able to scheme up with teams, but do you think like a lack of talent eventually catches up to them?
Yeah, I think it has to at that point in the playoffs. I completely agree. Frank Wright, he's done a fantastic job so far this year, but you can only go too far until you just get hit with so much talent overload. Like last night was an indication that they can survive in the playoffs. I just don't know how deep they can actually get. And if if they get healthier, then sure, you get Leonard back. Malik Hooker's pretty much done. But I think it's a spot where when you get deep, maybe first round of the playoffs for them, which is where they've been for the most part. But I think it's just a pretty big testament that you could have Jacoby Brissett back there. And last night kind of plays more of the game manager role. Marlon Mack does his thing against a bottom-ranked Chiefs defense. But having Jacoby Brissett look that comfortable, and the biggest thing that I saw coming into the season was Brissett hangs onto the ball so much, and he's getting it out quicker now. And I think it's really changing what this offense can do.
Yeah, just missing T.Y. Hilton last week against the Raiders. It's such an important cog of this offense to alleviate just so much pressure off the offensive line, off Brissett, knowing that you have a receiver out there that can beat you. Not that T.Y. had an amazing game, but he was an important part of the defensive focus for the Chiefs. That I thought that was a really interesting note, that if T.Y. is going to be healthy, this offense is going to look completely different. I think they could sustain the loss of Marlon Mack and piece together the running back situation, but it's hard to replace a talent like Hilton on the outside and how much he commands from the defense. So that's an interesting note moving forward, that maybe just completely do not back the Colts if Hilton's not around. And if Hilton is in, then maybe give them more than a fighting shot in some of these games. Bad week for anyone in survivor pools. I got bounced because I took the stupid Bears, and everyone else got bounced in the Sunday Nighter who had Kansas City. Hopefully you ended up using maybe the Vikings on the road. Maybe you still had Philly or New England. I didn't have either of those 2 left. So survivor pools whittled all the way down. You might want to start talking about hedging yourself out if there's very few people left and just splitting the top prize from here on out, because you're down to that point where almost everyone's eliminated that you can do that. But I want to talk about Oakland for a second. I think they backdoored their way just because of personnel problems and injuries into something that's kind of interesting, because Warren Sharp has been writing about this, and we've seen the Rams kind of convert to this style of offense, playing Higbee and Everett as much as possible in these 12 formations. Because Tyrell Williams was banged up and there was no J.J. Nelson, the Raiders did that against the Bears. They ended up playing a lot of these 12 sets with Waller and Dr. Moreau out on the edge, and it solved a lot of their offensive line issues, and it just created a lot of matchup problems that the Bears weren't ready for. I don't know how long this can sustain itself, and maybe it was just a fluky week. It was in London, but the Raiders' offense, well, it didn't look good. They were able to run the ball far more effectively, especially off tackle with these bruisers on the outside, adding an extra blocker and giving you the perception that they can still go run routes as well. That I'm kind of intrigued by this Oakland offense, but either way, I think it's great news for Josh Jacobs, who you were even talking about Marlon Mack being split out wide and running, or Aaron Jones running these receiver routes. Josh Jacobs was doing the same thing for the Raiders against the Bears.
Yeah, and that's like the last piece to the puzzle almost. We had like Coach Peak saying he might catch some passes, be split out wide, and you're seeing it a little bit. So hopefully we see more of it. But yeah, Jacobs played 68% of the snaps, and you were talking about 12 personnel. It's exactly what's helping teams built like Oakland. I mean, last week you have the Browns, who their offense is all a mess. They go into 12 personnel. They absolutely dominate the Ravens. Nick Chubb goes absolutely just 180, 160 yards, 3 touchdowns. They do whatever they want. You have teams like the Titans for the last 2 weeks have been running a lot of 12 personnel. Delaney Walker coming off the field for pass blocking tight ends like Jonnu Smith, and Derrick Henry doing really whatever he wants on 20-plus touches. So, yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs is just – he's been fantastic all year, and it's – I don't know if it's not being talked about as much because his volume's been down in some games they trail, whatever it is he plays on the West Coast. But every time he touches the ball, I mean, this guy is so elusive. He's breaking and making the first man miss, kind of like Saquon in a way when you actually watch him play. It's just that I don't think a lot of people are getting exposure to seeing him play. But, yeah, I think that these 12 personnels, especially when the guys can catch the ball, like I didn't know who Foster Monroe was for the most part, but he's actually athletic and seems like he can catch the ball. You even had Derek Carrier for like 10% of the snaps catching a couple balls, and we know what Darren Waller can do. So when you have these guys in 12 personnel, it's not even like you're just going to run the ball, so it helps a lot. I think that is a huge note to take moving forward, or to kind of stash away moving forward, and maybe even see the Browns stick with it tonight. But yeah, I think that's a really big piece to seeing what a lot of teams are going to do. And I thought the Packers were going to maybe do it a little bit because they have a ton of tight ends. They did for some of the game, but not too much, especially once they got up pretty big. They can change the whole format of how they wanted to play that game.
Yeah, we even saw a little bit from the Texans as well. Just like with Kenny Stills out, you would expect to see Kiki on the field a lot, and Kiki put up decent numbers, 3 for 76, but he was barely on the field the entire time. That was kind of surprising to me, thinking just how much they love to utilize these 3 wide receiver sets. But it seems like there is a shift, and it makes a lot of sense. It gives you extra protection if you have the bad offensive line, if you do need it, and then it gives you just a huge mismatch in terms of size against the secondary. Teams are so accustomed in building their teams around these. I mean, Seattle would be one thing from like 5 years ago when they had all these gigantic DBs, but since so many teams are playing dime packages over and over and getting rid of the linebacker and bringing in an undersized, basically slot corner, if they're now matched up against some dude who's 6'6" and 250 pounds, like that's an easy matchup. And that's what the Raiders really exploited against the Bears with Moreau and even Waller, that it wasn't deep plays, but it was just enough to generate these first downs. Like you throw that ball into contested areas and these guys can just body everyone out. I'm curious to see if the Raiders actually stick with this, if when Williams and Nelson end up coming back, because I have a sense that they probably won't.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing too. Like you just mentioned, you have your 2 outside kind of burners. And yeah, as I was replaying that game and watching it, everything was just to the sticks for the most part, especially for both teams really, but especially for the Raiders in these formations. So I think it's definitely a copycat league. We saw last year, the Eagles ran the most 12 personnel, Doug Peterson, Goddard, and Zach Ertz. And now you see a lot more teams going to it and having success early on. And I don't think there's been many teams that haven't had success. You touched on it with the Texans, and yeah, they had 2 tight ends on the field for over 2/3 of the game.
Okay, let's do reverse power rankings for a second. If we had to rank the worst 5 teams in the league, are the Redskins worse than the Dolphins? Because we're going to find out this week, because Jay Gruden just gets fired. Bill Callahan's going to step in and establish the run. We're not running the ball enough. So you probably should go pick up Adrian Peterson if he's available, because they're going to run him like 39 times against the Dolphins, which could actually be quite effective. But neutral field, you have this Dolphins team against this Redskins team. And maybe even throw the Bengals into that mix now, too. Although the Bengals have looked friskier in some of these matchups. Do you think the Dolphins and Skins are the 2 worst teams in the league?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can't really put the Jets there just because they're probably going to have Darnold back. But, I mean, with Falk there, they look terrible. But I think it's those 2 teams. And honestly, yeah, this is the week we're going to get to see. It's sort of the reverse of the Super Bowl, whatever you might call it in your fantasy league, if you got just the worst 2 teams playing each other. But I actually like Miami here. If I'm saying, like, just pure talent, at least from the offensive side. They're trying to lose games, so it seems, but it doesn't seem like the Redskins are doing much better. Injuries affecting Washington for sure. But I think Miami has just more talent, which is something I never thought I would say.
Yeah, I think they have more high-end talent when it comes down to it. And then there's that both teams just have no middle tier. And then all of a sudden there's just bad players. Although I was really surprised Washington was able to generate not a ton of pressure on Brady, but they were able to bring him down a few times. That as a streaming defense this week, I don't hate Washington against Miami because Miami's still pretty inept. Maybe getting Albert Wilson back coming off the bye, they kept him out long enough. He was close to playing a week ago. The bye week means he should be back. But even just against Rosen, like if you need a completely unowned defense to run through your lines. I'm not saying that they're the best streaming defense of the week, but they're definitely unowned in deeper leagues. That like, would you hate Washington here?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, we've been targeting Miami all year, and you're going to get they're going to be on your waiver wire for one, and then two, you're probably going to get them at a very cheap price point in DFS. But yeah, you touched on it. They made Brady, at least for the far majority of the first half, look like a 42-year-old quarterback just surviving out there, throwing just a terrible interception and really getting to him. So generating some pressure, sure. The secondary is just still lacking just so much talent back there. I think I saw just another injury for them in that secondary. So it's a spot where, yeah, if you're streaming them, trying to face Miami is the nuts matchup and probably the best matchup you get for both of these defense. Honestly, maybe the only week you could play either.
So if we do the overall power rankings of the best teams, I guess we'll put undefeated New England at number 1. Maybe we'll reserve judgment on San Francisco until after the Monday Nighter is over. They could still be undefeated. Shockingly enough, Tom Brady and Jimmy G, the only 2 remaining undefeated quarterbacks in the league. Are you worried at all about the Patriots offense? Like, there seems to be no qualms with the Patriots defense, although they haven't really played a high-end offense as of yet. They just look pretty locked down, and that's going to be a tough defense to overcome. But the offensive line for the Patriots is really banged up. It doesn't look great, and Brady's been, although the stats were there yesterday, they moved the ball basically at will until certain points. Brady's just making like weird, bad decisions lately. Is this something that you think is going to keep itself up, or is it just the end of September, beginning of October, and frankly, Brady doesn't give a shit?
Yeah, I think it's the second part a little bit more. Like the last 2 weeks, you see him just looking a little bit worse, and then when second half comes around, putting it on a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, obviously losing Antonio Brown, it kind of flips this offense on its head a little bit. Burkhead's been injured. Once they get a little healthier, and I don't think you're seeing most of their packages. You haven't seen the James White go out and catch 8 balls types of game. You finally got Sony Michel in a beneficial matchup running a little bit more. It shouldn't be understated either that James Devlin being out now for the year. This has been a couple weeks now, but instead of having more I formation, you're going to just find more 11 personnel with a single back. And I think that's actually going to work to their advantage as long as it seems like Philip Dorsett is healthy. But it's going to allow Rex Burkhead and James White to get on the field more than Sony Michel. And I think they forced Sony Michel this past week into a little bit of a Rex Burkhead role, making him run 18 routes, the most he's ever ran in his career, caught 3 balls. So I think the offense is totally fine. Maybe a little bit of playing down to the competition. I mean, yeah, people say what they want about the Patriots division. It's obviously terrible. But geez, getting to face Washington after playing just the Jets with Luke Falk and getting to play just the Bills and this other pieces of this division, it's just it doesn't get much easier. So I think it's just a little bit of a loft coming into, like you said, the end of going into October now. Yeah,
well, the Bills weren't a complete walkover because that defense is so good. And I'm still convinced that if Josh Allen doesn't take that hit and leaves that game, like they're live. As soon as Berkeley came in, they were not live to win that game anymore, even though they did have an opportunity and ended up giving it to John Brown to throw a pass into the end zone, which was kind of shocking. But if Josh Allen stays in that game, they could notch a victory there. It's going to be that sort of team. It's funny, like, because I have Kansas City ranked at number 2 overall, and clearly they do have some flaws. It's funny, Patrick Mahomes is now on pace to throw 15 fewer touchdowns than a year ago, which still puts him at 35, which is excellent. But when we talked about like season-long drafting and why Mahomes was a potential regression candidate, that didn't mean he wasn't going to be the number 1 quarterback, but it means that he wasn't going to throw 50 touchdowns again. And people like legit lost their minds. Like, how dare you say that? That's impossible that he wouldn't throw at least 45 touchdowns. But now we're in a circumstance where, you know, it takes 2 bad games and then all of a sudden you're not on pace to be the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. Now, maybe a lot of that had to do with after the second or the touchdown pass to heir to the chip fortune, Mr. Pringle, last night, that Tim Andercuss tweeted out that Patrick Mahomes might be the best quarterback of all time, and then he ends up being terrible and then like getting hurt at the end of the game. But it looks like he's going to be fine. But do you think that there's a huge gap between the Patriots and Chiefs? And if there is a team that's going to cause problems for the Patriots, do you think it is the Chiefs or potentially one with a better defense?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question because like you kind of were hinting at a little bit, like you don't have the Patriots in this defense that has just looked, I mean, in any type of neutralizing stat, they're just phenomenal right now, but they also haven't had a lot of pressure put on their defense, which is exactly what you would imagine the Chiefs do. I don't think it's a huge gap, but I think there's a decent gap between them and KC in that spot in the AFC. It's just the defense looks really good. You said it earlier, just playing a little bit more man coverage against them is beneficial. And these cornerbacks this year, I mean, yes, Stephon Gilmore, everybody knows the name for the Patriots, but Jason McCourty's playing better than him so far this year, and that's scary. You have both the McCourty brothers playing fantastic in the secondary there. So I do think that like these small 4 or 5 game samples can sway our opinion so much, but the defense has looked really good. There's obvious concerns, and I think a good amount of it for the offense for the Chiefs is honestly health related. Not having your running backs healthy, not having Tyreek for the most part. Sammy Watkins playing banged up a couple weeks now. So the gap, I don't think it's huge, but I think there is a gap between the Patriots and Kansas City in the AFC and really the rest of the AFC.
Before we get into the rest of the rankings and the waiver wire for the week, I did just want to talk about injuries just a little bit. Like we found out just before we started recording, Alex Kappa, the guard for the Bucs, played the entire game with a broken arm, and now he's going to miss time. The right tackle, DeMar Dodson's going to miss some time as well with a calf and hamstring injury. And we saw the Saints generate a ton of pressure on Jameis Winston. Jameis wasn't like awful in the game. He also wasn't very good, and Lattimore made quick work of Mike Evans. Do you think this is a thing where Godwin has surpassed Mike Evans, not necessarily as a fantasy asset because he has done that, but is this going to remain all year, or do you think that teams start to say, you know what, we don't need to take away Mike Evans, we now have to account for Chris Godwin, and then it swings back to Mike Evans a little bit? Because if teams continue to treat Evans as the number one, and maybe they should, because maybe he is the bigger threat, and then you let Godwin try to beat you, and if that's all you do, then you're not going to win a bunch of games. But I would think that defenses start to account for Godwin a little bit more if they have the personnel to do so, and maybe that opens up some room for Mike Evans.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's if they have the personnel to do so. I think you do see exactly what you're seeing. Like end of the year, Chris Godwin, just the better season overall, fantasy, real life. And I think a lot of it is just where he's lining up. Like you're going to have most of the stud cornerbacks in this league. They won't follow you into the slot. It's very rare that they do. I think that's something that will change over the years. But when Godwin's lining up in 11 personnel in the slot every single time, his matchup is just so beneficial. I mean, we saw him just picking apart yesterday, just the defense out of the slot and Mike Evans getting shut down on the outside. Lattimore just has his number, but they're going to have their weeks. We've seen it already kind of seesaw back and forth, but Godwin's been the one who's more stable and consistent. And really for any team and any player, if you're a good wide receiver running out of the slot, you get to use more of the field. You're not just stuck on one hash mark. You get to usually get the second or third or fourth best cornerback on the team facing you. So I do think that this holds up. Again, maybe not every single week, but majority of the weeks, yes.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, we saw a lot of pressure generated. Now, the Saints have a really good defensive line, but they were going up against a banged-up Bucs offensive line, which is going to continue to be banged up. And now they get Carolina, who's looked vastly improved defensively since these teams played in week 2, and Tampa ended up winning in Carolina. So I think that's really interesting to note. Carolina's defense in this matchup should create a lot of havoc in the Bucs backfield. If the Bucs can't establish the run and Jameis has to drop back so many times, the fantasy points might eventually come, but he's going to be under duress. And I think that's something that we're seeing right now with the Cowboys as well. They lose Smith. He's been out. Now Lyle Collins goes out too, that they're just not holding up for as long as they need. Now, Dallas got down by so much in that game. They were only facing 4-man rushes, and they could still basically not keep anyone out of the backfield, that they need to find a way to utilize Dak's mobility and play action a little bit more. But I think that we're going to get to a point of the season where they get the Jets this week, and you might see Sam Darnold come back, but I mean, they could even lose that game if Darnold's like 100%. I wouldn't expect it, but I think these offensive line injuries go a little bit more by the wayside than maybe we want to give them credit for when we're looking at spreads or we're trying to accurately project streaming defenses. Like, we know the Jets are bad, stream against the Jets. We know the Dolphins are actively bad, stream against the Dolphins. But if we're looking at these other scenarios where you can just generate pressure on the quarterbacks, we've seen it with Cincinnati and their offensive line woes. The Bills lost 2 offensive linemen yesterday as well, that maybe even tonight as we get to the Monday Nighter, and we'll talk about Showdown a little bit later on, like maybe not having a full complement of offensive linemen for San Francisco might be a huge factor in this game, especially going up against a fearsome pass rush from the Browns.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it is super underrated, whether it's DFS, streaming defenses in season long. Beginning of the year, like one of the first things I look at is the people are most underappreciated is offensive and defensive line matchups, especially for just running backs, quarterbacks not having to face pressure. We've seen it so far this year for the most part, like the Bengals. I mean, you just haven't had much there most more weeks than not if they face any decent pass rush. I think it is important to kind of watch that moving forward, how these injuries do affect you. I mean, if you look at in his short career, but Dak's career right now with Tyron Smith out, he faces 10% more pressure. That's not just by coincidence. It's because that's one of the best linemen, or at least a startable lineman for most teams going down. When you bring somebody else in, you're facing these monsters on the defensive end that you're not prepared for. So I agree. And just quickly, like going back to the whole Godwin talk, he's getting Carolina next week, and I would expect that to continue. Carolina's been getting torched in the slot so far this year.
Yeah, it was surprising to see that Dede piled up 6 catches in the first half. I played Dede over Chark because I'm an idiot. But I thought that Bradbury would have a much easier time with Chark on the outside. Apparently, that's just not the case. And DJ Chark rules, and he has an immense connection with Gardner Minshew. However, Dede ends up with 6 catches in the first half, 1 in the second half. But that was an area of the field they were exploiting to no end. And I agree with you. Godwin should be in a great circumstance here if they can keep the pressure off of Jameis. And even as a quick draw, maybe even look to, I don't want to play O.J. Howard, but it could be a circumstance where if they don't have enough time to let Evans develop his routes on the outside, and Bobo Wilson can't do anything either. They have to go to the seams. They have to go to the slot, and those are the quick draws that you're looking for. But we'll break down those matchups more as the week goes along. If I go New England, Kansas City is the 2 best teams in the league. I guess the big question is, who's number 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it shifts over for me to the NFC, and I really believe in the Saints right now. And it's just crazy. It's crazy what they're able to do just 2 weeks without Drew Brees, and the defense has looked very strong. I mean, last week a little bit leaky, but a lot of that was coming in what was maybe more of a prevent defense on that final drive where Godwin scores his second touchdown. And yeah, they were getting pressure against Jameis. So for me, I think it's the Saints, but I'm somebody who also thinks that the Seahawks are very close to being up there. That matchup between the Rams and the Seahawks on Thursday night, that's probably 2 top 10 teams in the league matchup. Seahawks coming out on top at home. Maybe a little bit of luck goes into that, but credited for the win. So for me, it's probably the Saints shifting back over to the NFC.
Yeah, 3 consecutive wins now with Teddy Bridgewater because they went into Seattle and won as well. So, and I agree with you. I think I'm going to have the Saints at number 3 solely because what does this team now look like when Drew Brees returns? Like they have the ability to let Drew Brees get healthy because this division's kind of beaten up on itself a little bit and they've pulled away. And we know that they're going to be a better team with Brees. And it actually kind of works out well too, only because you're just throwing everyone not necessarily off your scent because you're still winning, but the type of offense that you're going to run when Drew Brees comes back is probably going to be completely different. So I liked what you said earlier about Sean Payton, just how good he is at scheming offensively to make someone like Teddy Bridgewater, who's not bad, but he's not good. There's a reason that he's a backup. He's a high-paid backup. He's someone that you would want behind your starter, knowing that you can go to him and it's not Luke Falk and your season is over, or even Trevor Siemian for that matter. Like having a good backup, especially behind a stud QB, but when Drew Brees comes back and this offense takes over from where we know it can get to and the defense is playing top notch, I agree with you at New Orleans. Then we have like a bucket of these NFC teams. I don't think there's a third AFC team right now that is better than like the first. Like if we say Kansas City, New England, they're on sort of a tier by themselves, and then you have like 8 NFC teams, then it's the Houstons and the Colts. And if we're going to give credit for the Saints for being good once Drew Brees comes back, I do think that if the Chargers can figure out a way how to tread water until their guys come back, but maybe they're just permanently Andrew cursed. When Tim picked them to win the Super Bowl, that just their whole season was a complete write-off. But if they do get healthy again, and Okun comes back, and James comes back, and Perriman stops getting hurt after 30 plays every single week, and Melvin Ingram is fine, that they will eventually look good. Even Hunter Henry could be on track to return at some point. We didn't think that was going to be possible. But I'm going to put Green Bay, Dallas, the Seahawks, the Rams, San Francisco. Who else should we throw into that? Philadelphia.
What about your boy Josh Allen? What about the Bills? The Bills have albeit in terms of contending in the playoffs, but if you look at their schedule, like a real chance at maybe being one of the, I don't know, fakest. The defense looks good, but like a 7-1 team come 3 weeks from now.
The Bills are almost most definitely making the playoffs, and
right?
That's going to be just based off the strength of schedule. Even if they lose to New England again, they essentially we kind of broke this down on the show last week, that they have so many cupcake cupcake games left, and they should win those, that you have to win these 50-50 games. They just won one against the Titans. Like, that's a team that they need to beat and end up getting the 5 seed here. And maybe something breaks weird for the Patriots too, that they end up, they play the Chiefs at some point. They're going to play the Texans, or no, they'll play the Colts. Maybe they just randomly lose a game, then the Bills would have to go into Foxborough and beat them at some point. But the division isn't out of the question for them. But is anyone really taking the Bills seriously as a real threat here? Maybe they should be. Maybe they should be talked up in that way because the defense is so good. And Josh Allen has the ability, my producer Paul pointed this out, big Bills fan, that maybe Josh Allen's like a MMA fighter, just needs to take a few cracks to the head at first, and that really wakes him up and gets him going. Like, maybe Josh Allen needs to run into a pile and not get concussed 3 or 4 times. Then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, he's ready to go and lead these comebacks because he's been really good at it so far in his career.
Yeah, you saw Josh Allen, I mean, coming off concussion protocol, and then I think it was like the first quarter, he just gets absolutely leveled, gets right back up. Guy just doesn't even care. But no, I think that the defense, it looks completely solid. It's primarily his own defense with a shutdown cornerback, and they're getting pressure. But then on offense, if you get Devin Singletary back, if you make what we saw this past week, a guy that they're high on at wide receiver, Duke Williams, if you make him into anything that is manageable, it's an offense that can work and rely on a defense. Maybe not one that you trust, but I think of some past Ravens teams. And yeah, you talk about the cupcake matchups. You just have to get into the playoffs and then maybe cause some damage. But yeah, if we're talking about power ranking them, yeah, probably not one of the top ones. But I think it's interesting because 7-1 is very realistic if you look at the schedule.
Oh, most definitely. It's just how legitimate is that 7-1? Obviously, they're going to go and win these games, so it's legit. They would win the games. It's just projecting them forward. Like, if they were to play Green Bay on a neutral site, like, who would you rather pick? It'd probably be Green Bay, right?
Yeah, I would definitely pick Green Bay there. Yeah, that's the exact cases when you're actually sitting down, power ranking them, taking the records away. They're probably not up there. Definitely not top 5, but I mean, pushing top 10, I would say.
Well, it's funny. On the Sunday show, I've given out 2 Bills teases the last 2 weeks, and as it turned out, I didn't actually have to tease them and cost myself money. I'm glad I won the wagers, but said, you can tease the Bills up to plus 13 and tease the under up to like 46 against the Patriots, and that wasn't necessary. The Bills covered the regular spread, and they covered on the under. This week I was like, oh yeah, just tease the Bills up to plus 9, tease the under up to 45.5, bet the under, you're good to go. That hit, but so did the Bills plus 3, and so did the under just outright. That maybe this is just the way to play it. Like, the only game the Bills haven't covered so far this year was against the Bengals because they were asked to win by 6 or more. I think that any time that you get the Bills in a field goal situation, especially where they're underdogs, like, that is a prime time to pounce on the Bills. They've been very good against the spread so far.
Yeah, if they're underdogs for sure, if it's that sort of a spread, and then also if they're home. Like, when this Bills team is home in person, I got to watch them create havoc on Aaron Rodgers' worst career game ever. It's just like it's a college environment in Buffalo, and those guys get up for every single game. And then also, as the season goes on, you just get the weather playing a little bit of a factor too. So yeah, if they're at home in small spreads, it's always something that I personally look for. But yeah, so far this year, when you have a defense like that, you're always in it, and you're going to find yourself in a lot of close games and winning most of them.
All right, so New England, Kansas City, New Orleans, who are we putting at number 4?
I think I'm going to give that to Seattle. I just
over
like
Green Bay?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Seattle over Green Bay. I think I have concerns, and I guess I'm being anti-biased because I'm a Packers fan, but I do have concerns, and maybe a little particular with the defense. And the thing that I was kind of hanging my hat on was I thought the secondary was like top 3 in the league coming into this past week. And then sure, you have good wide receivers out there in Gallup and obviously Amari, but they just torched them. Like, Jair is somebody that I don't think he faces much better wide receivers than Amari as seasons go on. But I mean, if you're talking about playoffs and how some of these best teams are set up, I'm a little bit concerned there. And we didn't get to Zeke. We didn't get to see Zeke kind of have a full workload because of the game flow. So who knows how they look on the ground if they do look improved in that game, if you have a 20-plus carry Zeke game. So a little bit concerned. I do think that the worst nightmare happened outside of Aaron Rodgers getting hurt for the Packers is Devontae Adams. Like, their wide receiver depth is so bad. It's wide receiver 3s and 4s for most teams now filling in as the number 1 and 2 spot with MVS and Geronimo Allison. So it seems like they dodged the bullet with Devontae Adams. I think turf toe is something that they're letting on, like, he's a lot better than he might actually be, but there's a chance he plays this upcoming weekend, which is, to me, kind of miraculous. But we'll see how it goes. If he's back and he's fully healthy, then yeah, maybe you bump them to 4, but I think that's a major concern. And we're starting to see holes being poked in a defense that looked very good after 3 weeks, but it's just it's so tough to judge these defenses, really, even after like an 8-game sample.
Have we effectively slept on the 49ers so far? Or are we just waiting to see how they do against Cleveland? Because I think that spread is up to 5 now, that I think Cleveland is entirely live in that game.
Yeah, I think they're entirely live too. I think that their secondary being injured tonight, and we'll get into it, makes it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, we probably have slept on them. Like the 49ers secondary on the outsides has been pretty stout. They've been struggling against slot wide receivers, but yeah, for the most part, the 49ers have looked good. And it's so weird. They're such a weird team where they have so much talent, and I guess they're smart and doing something that most teams don't. They're just playing it all. Like they're playing 5 wide receivers. They're playing 3 running backs every single week. Not most teams that play 3 wide receivers and 1 to 2 running backs. They're playing like 8-man rotations on offense with their skill positions. And you have George Kittle. So it's interesting that they're getting the right matchups that they want. And so far it's been working.
Quickly, are these teams for real good, or are they just teams that beat up on bad teams? 1, the Baltimore Ravens.
I think that they are teams that beat up on bad teams. It would lean that way, but I think injuries have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, because that defense is not good.
Yeah.
And maybe it was never good. We just gave them all this credit for being the Ravens defense coming into the season. Yeah, being down Jimmy Smith isn't helping, but he's old at this point too. I don't think him coming back is just going to solve a lot of their defensive woes. Like they're an okay defense leaning towards below average, and everyone had kind of penciled them in as like, well, this is definitely a top 5 defense. Don't worry about that side of the ball. But it's actually their offense that's a lot better. Like, yes, Lamar turned the ball over a whole bunch of times. That's the only reason that game goes to overtime yesterday, just generating these short fields for the Steelers. And the Steelers defense actually looks way better than the Ravens defense right now. But I don't know if Pittsburgh's like a good team or not. I think that they might not, they're not like Washington bad, but they're probably like one of the worst 12 teams in the league, especially with another injury at quarterback.
Yeah, completely. Now it seems like Devlin Hodges is going to start next week. They're saying right now for week 6. And yeah, I'm somebody right there with you that is higher on this Pittsburgh defense after like 1 or 2 weeks where they got just walked over. Especially at home, that week 2 matchup, people were kind of throwing in the towel on them, but the defense was injured. Then they acquire Minkah Fitzpatrick, so that's a huge add. Joe Hayden, TJ Watt get healthier. They have a ton of just number 1 picks on that defense now, and I think it is an actually pretty solid defense. Overall as a team, yeah, when you have just so many injuries, especially to your quarterback position, offensive line play hasn't been the greatest. It's tough, and I think that Baltimore, just to kind of finish up on them, yeah, they can't avoid the injuries. I think Tony Jefferson's now on IR, another guy in the defensive unit, and it's something that I think you're right. Like they lose one of their better pass rushers who played last night for the Packers, Darius Smith, to free agency. And yeah, this team is a totally different team that you're right. People just kind of assume that this mean Baltimore Ravens, Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs defense is still there when there's not many of those players left outside of Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah. Minnesota. They seem like a classic beat up on bad teams team.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're built so well, and it's crazy that he played well this week, but like their $28-29 million player in Kirk Cousins might be the thing that's holding them back the most.
It's just strange. Like Warren Sharp had the stat last week that when they play teams with a winning record outdoors, they're essentially winless over the last 2 years. But you get them at home and you get them into positive game flow situations, and you see what they can do. The defense is still pretty good. It's not like elite, but getting Anthony Barr back has really saved that entire defense. So good thing that he ended up deciding, you know what, the Jets, we're going to call this one quits. I'm going to go back to the Vikings. However, if they can't get up in games and run the ball, it was a lot like the Bears. I was surprised the Bears were even able to mount a comeback. And a lot of that had to do with Derek Carr just arbitrarily throwing the ball away on a toss that allowed the Bears just to jumpstart their comeback at the beginning of the second half. But if the Bears get down by a bunch, they don't necessarily have all the pieces against like even a decent defense. Against the Raiders defense, maybe. Against like a decent defense, I don't know if Chase Daniel's leading them back. It almost seems that way with Cousins, despite the fact they have both Diggs, they have Thielen, Dalvin Cook's being used out of the backfield, but if they can't just pound the rock over and over, they're kind of useless. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up against Philly this week, a team that's really stout against the run and really bad against the pass, that if Philly gets up on them, can they just kind of unleash the dogs and get to Kirk Cousins, just force him into bad passing situations. We'll see how that works out. It's going to be a very interesting game in week 6. Houston. Is Houston actually any good? Because I can't figure it out.
Yeah, so I think Houston's good. I think that they have, in maybe it's a little bit of some donkey syndrome on their coaches. I think they have a good offense, but I mean, what is Duke Johnson? Where is this man on this team? So another week where Carlos Hyde actually plays well, but and the game script helps him out, But overall, over the course of the season, there's been way more game flows where Duke Johnson deserves more than 30-40% of the snaps. So I think this team is good. I think the issues with them are they have their pass rush. The pass rush is there. They obviously have the talent on offense. It's just what's happening in sort of the middle of the field and really more so in the secondary. So I think that's a big issue for them. They've been playing for probably 2 or 3 weeks now with both of their starting safeties playing limited to not practicing all week. So pretty much is an indicator that they're playing banged up. But yeah, I mean, Joseph on the outside is not any force at cornerback. So their main issue is their secondary, in my opinion. And then it's Carlos Hyde is playing well when he gets the opportunities. It's just I want to see more Duke Johnson, especially in games like last week when they're trailing, not this one that just passed, but the week before when they're trailing so much and Johnson sees more snaps, but just not enough opportunities.
Yeah, Carlos Hyde was averaging close to 6 yards per carry through the first 3 weeks of the season. And since he's down around Carlos Hyde level, 3 yards per carry. Well, Duke Johnson has sustained, his 6 yards per carry. Now that's a misleading stat, just looking at yards per carry, solely because when Duke Johnson is running the ball, they are directly in passing situations when you probably shouldn't be running the ball. So teams are like, yeah, have your 6 yards, go nuts, you're not getting a first down. I just think he's a more dynamic player for what he brings to the table and what they need to be doing more on offense. That's probably passing to running backs, especially if they're going to be playing this bigger personnel. I actually think that Duke Johnson works a little bit better in their backfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how Bill O'Brien adjusts. The last team I threw on that list is the Rams. The Rams are good, but are they how can I phrase this? Obviously, they're not as good as last year, but can they get back up to an elite level, or are they just lacking the personnel and teams have figured them out a bit and that just killed Jared Goff?
Yeah, so this is an interesting spot with the Saints with the Rams, because it reminds me a lot of last year. Like we thought this defense was good at the beginning of the year, getting Peters and all the players that they got in Ndamukong Suh up front. And then we kind of slowly realized, this secondary is a problem. And that's what it seems like is happening very quickly over the past 2 weeks. So I still think they're a good team. I still think they're right there around top 10, but I bumped them down below the Saints, the Packers, the Seahawks so far this year, Dallas even, after we see these last 2 weeks that there's a real issue there. And it's kind of a keep up game. And so far, for the most part this year, Jared Goff hasn't looked that great. If anything, he's looked good to say, to put it like the kindest for Jared Goff so far. Completion percentage, just making really bad decisions. I guess the one bright spot you could take away from their loss, other than that they probably should have won the game, but Todd Gurley played over 90% of the snaps, and he looked like Todd Gurley for when he was touching the ball. So I'm not sure what to make of that moving forward, but I think this is a concern for the Rams, is really just the secondary. Just closing out also with the Texans, their offensive line is like the clear concern for them too with their secondary. But yeah, the Rams are a hard team to kind of judge right now, dominating the first 3 weeks, albeit no Drew Brees, playing with an injured Cam Newton week 1 and getting the Browns week 3, whose offense was just all a mess. So and also just getting a beneficial spot with all those guys in their secondary for the Browns being out that week. It's a tough team to tell. I would probably lean more so they're beating up on bad teams that's quarterbacks are injured.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did last year when they went on their winning streak. I think they played 7 consecutive backup quarterbacks, and even then, it's not like the defense was lights out by any means, but this offense continues to roll, and they're going to post beaucoup points on bad defenses like we saw with Atlanta. I'm actually surprised that Dan Quinn didn't end up getting fired as well, along with Jay Gruden, but I guess he's there for at least the end of the season. They don't want to do anything midstream. Can't change horses that way. Let's jump into the waiver wire, though, and the injuries, starting at running back. The big ones that I found, and you can find the entire list of this with the rankings and the snap shares up on my Instagram feed, up on my Facebook page, and dkplaybook.com. If you hit the description of this video or podcast, you can find the rankings up there right now. Christian McCaffrey had cramps towards the end of the game. He's going to likely play in week 6. David Johnson stayed in the game, but he's been dealing with a stiff back. That's why his snap share was down around 70% instead of his regular 85, 90%. It did lead to a Chase Edmonds touchdown. And frankly, Edmonds looked more spry in the game, but he's probable for week 6. Gallman, we spent all the fab bucks for Gallman. Looked great last week in a tougher matchup. That didn't really bother me as much, but getting a concussion right away and then not playing anymore, that was suboptimal. They play on Thursday night, so he's likely out for this game against the Patriots, although Saquon Barkley could be back. If I was the Giants, though, Sal, knowing that you have a bye week coming up, or at least an extended rest, a mini bye with the Thursday nighter, even if it gets a bad matchup against the Patriots, you keep Saquon out of this game and let him get right, don't you?
Yeah, you keep him out of the game. That's exactly right. It's on a short week anyways, and it's like the last team that you probably want to have him play and go up against. So I would keep him out of this game. And then, what you get there and what John Hilleman, if you imagine Gallman misses on a short week with the concussion is just like a 1 week rental. And I don't really want that.
Yeah, a 1 week rental, not even a good 1 week rental. Like, it was at least worth investing into Gallman because you thought if Saquon didn't have superhuman powers and got himself back quickly, if he hadn't suffered a concussion, you get Gallman for like 4 weeks. And I do think that having a starting running back, a running back 2, like, let's face it, like a mid-tier to low-end running back 2, but someone who's going to get volume is worth spending all the money on. If you need a plug-and-play, sure, he's a guy who's likely going to start. He'll probably get 15 to 18 touches. That's fine, but it's against a bad defense. It's against a really good defense. So really, what's the upside? He'd have to fall into the end zone probably twice to make up for a lack of role in the passing game and a lack of yardage on the ground to actually have something substantial for him. And I'm just not going to break by bank for that. I think there's other options that you can turn to. The other injuries, Burkhead misses with a foot. Devin Singletary misses again. This is sort of like the Barkley thing. I think Singletary was healthy enough to play, but wasn't 100%. The Bills have a bye week this week, so you might as well keep out your rookie, get him back to full strength, because what you need to do with soft tissue injuries, let them get back up to 100%, because you bring them back early and they're 85% or even 90%, the chances for re-aggravation and re-injury are so much higher that you get your guys healthy. We talked about the Bills. They could potentially be 7-1. They're going to need these guys, so get them as healthy as possible when you can, and they won anyway. Jamal Williams sits the game. Darren Sproles hurts his quad. He's going to be week to week. Quad injuries we've seen keep people out at least a week, so at least that gives us some more clarity in the Eagles' backfield. But the actual rankings at running back, no one of note, really. Like, you're not breaking the bank. You're not spending tons of fab bucks or a number one waiver priority. Jalen Samuels is still available in like 60% of leagues. Go out and get him, I suppose. He might throw interceptions out of the Wildcat, but then Rashad Penny, Chris Thompson, Colonel Mostert, Ito Smith, Gus Edwards, like, these are just legit handcuffs. Latavius Murray, Darrell Williams, Raquel Armstead, Rex Burkhead, and it's like Madison, Hilliman. If you need a running back for this week, it would probably be Thompson, AP, or Hilliman if you needed someone to just plug and play, but I don't like the long-term prospects of those guys. Is there any running back just in general you can see as someone you would want to actively pick up from this list? Because I'm good with just passing on them all.
I think, nobody like to plug and play like those Washington backs. No real interest there. I think that I do want to, and I'm going out of my way to. He's just not there in the 3-4 leagues I play in. But I do want Alexander Madison. He's touching the ball like 25-30% of the time, but that's not why you want him. You want him because he would fill the Dalvin Cook role, and it's not even like he's just going to come in. You don't know what to expect from him. When he's touching the ball, he's looking really good. Like if this was the week that, or not as if it's going to happen, but if Dalvin Cook gets hurt this week and he's done for the year, say, and Alexander Madison is now the one that people just want to empty the clip on in terms of fab bucks, in terms of number one priority, I might as well just have him now instead of keeping a backup tight end on my roster. So that's like, the mindset right now is no injuries really happen to want to have us to get any of these running backs for this upcoming week. But I'm slowly loading up on Madison, Armstead, Chase Edmonds, those types of guys that would come into an 85-90% workload if their guy was to go down, and we've seen something out of them as being a good back and to have some confidence in.
I was initially with you on Madison, but over the past 3 weeks, Amir Abdullah has really kind of carved out half the role that Madison has. Like, at first it looked like it was going to be Cook, and then it was going to be Madison. And then all of a sudden Amir Abdullah pops in, and some weeks he's playing more snaps than Madison is. I think that we wouldn't see a situation necessarily where Madison just takes on the Dalvin Cook role like we would want, that we would see some sort of split. And I'm not even entirely convinced that he would be on the high end of it. I'd say more likely than not he would. But if all of a sudden we're looking at 55% Abdullah, even if it's just because of pass protection circumstances, that I am a bit wary of that. That's why I have someone like Armstead ranked higher, that it does appear, just because a complete lack of depth at the running back position and the way that they're utilizing Leonard Fournette right now, that maybe they go out and get someone else to complement with Armstead. But if there's no Fournette, it does look like that Armstead would play 80% of the snaps. He would be the one that I would want.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I have them right now, 1-2, Madison, Armstead. So it's kind of a pick 'em for me, but I agree. They drafted both of these, both teams, Madison going second round, drafting Armstead this year for Jacksonville. So I do agree, like the workload for Fournette is bigger, because you see Dalvin Cook, like, he's playing fantastic, but he's also only on the field, like, on average, 68-70% of the snaps. He's been in the 60s for 3 of the 5 games so far. So I'm with you there. I think for me, it's like a pick 'em between Madison and Armstead, and you're probably more likely to find Armstead hanging around on the waivers.
Yeah, I mean, he has a tough name to pronounce just on first glance, so people are like, whoa, Can't have that
Yeah,
guy.
I pass on the first name for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're just looking at, you mentioned like the snap shares, if we look at all the running backs in the league from Sunday and Thursday and see which running backs played more than 70% of their team snaps, it's not as high as you'd think. Even Aaron Jones didn't get to that. Trey Carson played enough with Jamal Williams out to play 32% of the snaps, with Aaron Jones only playing 68. I have all these up right now, again, on my Facebook and Instagram feeds, but DJ over 70%. Elliott, 93%. Christian McCaffrey, who we should probably talk about Bonifant here in a second, at 86%. Fournette, 92%. Gurley, 93%. Chris Carson, 84%. And then we got James Conner, 80%. Those are the guys. It's kind of stunning, actually, when you look at it. We're so used to having even a collection of 4, 5, 6 running backs. Oh, and Le'Veon Bell, sorry. Of running backs that play like 80% or more every single week. But even the guys that we're normally penciling into that, it's essentially Zeke, Christian McCaffrey, Bell, and Leonard Fournette are really the guys that you can count on every single week to be over 80%. And then after that, it's kind of a crapshoot that depends on game flow.
Yeah, it definitely depends on game flow. I was actually surprised to see James Conner see 80% of the touches after the game, the way that they did it with Samuel. I don't know if Samuel throwing an interception and a Wildcat got him down the totem pole. But yeah, James Conner saw 80%. And yeah, I mentioned this, I think week 2 is you're just seeing a total transformation of like more likely to see like 3 running backs involved than 1. So guys breaking out for 70+% of the snaps, keep an eye on it. And I think that's why it's even more important than ever to not chase the John Hillman 1 or 2 games, like we were just saying, and just load up on the guys that I'd rather have these high-end handcuffs on my bench so that maybe I have a chance and they could win me a league if something happens, whereas my backup tight end's not winning me a league.
No, yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. That's why you roster one, you fill one in for bye week, or just stream the entire time. Like we'll see Gerald Everett just pops up and he's wildly available. You can go pick him up if you want. Or Ben Watson could be back this week for the Thursday night game after being inactive on Sunday, returning from a suspension. Chris Herndon, wildly available. Like there's guys to go pick up as a plug and play. And like we talked about off the top, no tight ends were good this week. So sometimes it doesn't even matter. At running back, it does specifically matter. With Christian McCaffrey, are you worried at all that maybe this leg cramping could be like, man, maybe we shouldn't give him the ball 38 times a game. Maybe we should scale this back a little bit, or potentially he misses the game. I don't think that's going to happen, but should this be on our radars to monitor throughout the week?
Yeah, we should be monitoring it. It definitely pushes Bonifant up my list in terms of just if I was to pick players up this week. A scale back, though, for McCaffrey, it's just it would be interesting to see because his pass catching role is not repeatable. It doesn't seem like from a guy like Reggie Bonifant and really probably most players are in the entire league. But I think if you see a scale back, it's like 85% of the load, which instead of him having these 50-point monster games, it's 35. So I don't think there's any concern from a fantasy perspective. If I was the Panthers, yeah, I would stop running him out there for every single play. But it seems like they need that to win these games.
The only other situations I wanted to talk about specifically were Kansas City's backfield and the Chargers' backfield. We saw Eckler play more snaps than Melvin Gordon. However, it was Melvin Gordon doing all the damage on the ground. Eckler picks up 15 catches. That's probably not going to happen every single week, but this Chargers offense looked out of sync. I know they're dealing with a bunch of injuries on both sides of the ball and on the offensive line, but I actually think this team is better with Austin Eckler as their starting running back.
I completely agree. And I think Melvin Gordon thought that too. That's why he came out of the holdout. So you saw Eckler. It's not even like it's just going to be a split like most running backs because of that pass catching role where, okay, Melvin Gordon's back. He's going to play 70% of the snaps. Eckler's going to get 30. Like it's not going to happen. If Gordon gets bumped up from playing the 46, 50% of the snaps he played this week to going up to a 70, 75%, you're still probably going to see Eckler out there for, I would argue, maybe majority of the snaps. He was on the field a ton with Gordon. He was on the field when they were at the goal line, tackled on the 1 yard line. Then he got a fumble on the 1 yard line and went into the end zone trying to reach for the pylon. So you're going to continue to see Eckler out there just breaking records with 15 receptions, 16 targets is insane. And yeah, they need pass catching help. I think as long as you see Hunter Henry out, you're going to see just increased emphasis on scheming Austin Eckler, maybe not out wide as much, but at least in the slot, because they just have nothing to take pressure away once a team keys in on Keenan Allen, which it took 3 weeks for teams to do that. But now it seems like after the last 2, that's what they're doing. And Eckler is going to be the main priority and the main beneficiary after that happens.
Yeah, Eckler 66% of the snaps, Melvin Gordon 46% of the snaps. So they were running 2 running back sets at multiple points during the game against Denver. Kansas City backfield, Damian Williams returns, plays the majority of the snaps, 56%. McCoy gets 22%. Darrell Williams gets 22%. I kept checking to see if Shady re-aggravated his ankle injury, but no, he just fumbled and they benched him. That was really surprising.
Yeah, what was that? What happened? Because I was doing the same thing. I was like, I don't know if I should go off of these stats right now, the 22%. But I saw the fumble, and then after that, you don't really see much more of Shady McCoy. And I guess this is what like beginning of the year people were expecting, like a third of the snap Shady McCoy role. But after the past couple of weeks, sure, dealing with that ankle injury coming out of the games 2 weeks in a row. But very surprising to just see him drop down that far. Especially surprising if he did get benched. That Andy Reid, a guy who just loves him, would just put him out like that. And yeah, you saw in the broadcast them talking about how he just holds the ball out wide and stuff. He didn't even do it on that play. So it wasn't like ball security was the issue, getting lazy.
Yeah, he holds the ball like a loaf of bread, but he's always done that. So
yeah,
it's kind of surprising. It's just, unless I can see something coming out after we finish recording the show, because why would they release it before we record the show or during the show? Because then we'd have the information. It only works out after we finish that they can release this stuff that like, oh yeah, he re-aggravated his ankle. That's why he wasn't playing as much and not getting the ball. That would make sense, but as we know right now, like nothing was mentioned after the game about it. Nothing was mentioned in the game about it. That it's just sort of a mystery at this point. So I'd pay attention to beat reporters, but going into week 6, Damian Williams does appear to be the guy that you want to be starting in the Chiefs backfield right now. And it puts McCoy and Darrell Williams in like that low end fringe flex spot, even with 4 teams on bye, just because you have no trust into that situation. Wide receivers, we are going to get to some injuries here. Sammy Watkins exited the game with a hamstrings, and Sammy Watkins, we got some injuries. It's usually his foot, and it was his ankle coming into the game. He probably does not play next week. Tyreek Hill also missed the game. He could be back. We'll monitor that. Brandon Cooks left the Thursday night game with a concussion. He will have to pass protocol if he wants to end up playing this week. Hollywood Brown hurt his ankle early in the game. He tried to come back, and then he wasn't on the field again, so monitor him. It doesn't look like it's going to be super serious. The Philip Dorsett hamstring injury killed all my prop parlays. I was really big on Dorsett over 3.5 catches. Then he gets hurt on like the first play of the game. We don't see him again. He's listed as week to week with a hamstring. Alex Erickson suffered a concussion for the Bengals. James Washington hurt his shoulder in that Steelers-Ravens game. Kenny Stills missed the week with a hamstring. Christian Kirk, Brashad Perriman, Damiere Byrd, Tyrell Williams, Devontae Adams, Taylor Gabriel, Deshaun Jackson, Paris Gambeau with the Colts going on to buy, and AJ Green all missed the week as well. I do think there is some value here on the waiver wire for wide receiver and other positions, only because I do think Sam Darnold comes back this week, which injects life back into Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon. So I have Robbie Anderson as my number 1 overall waiver wire pickup. Dante Pettis I have at number 2 now that he's healthier. They're talking him back up, and he doesn't play until Monday night. That if you do play in one of these leagues where guys are still available on free agency, I would just go scoop up Dante Pettis right now for some bum at the back end of my roster if he's available, and he is in a lot of leagues, just to see if he ends up emerging as the guy in San Francisco. Then you don't have to spend any waivers on him.
Yeah, I completely agree. If for some reason people are dropping Robbie Anderson in your league, go and get him, because the whole deep threat ability, and also like he runs crisp routes in the intermediate section, those are going to come back. What seems like Darnold's going to be back sooner rather than later. And the same exact thing can be said for Crowder. Like we saw week 1, Darnold, the narrative, he loves throwing to the slot receivers. Adam Gase, his coach, loves scheming that way. So the guy that's going to benefit probably a ton is Crowder. So those are 2 guys that I have atop here as well. Getting excited. We're going to get to tight end, Chris Herndon coming back. But other guys that kind of stand out, I have sort of a laundry list, but a lot of them is just deeper league options. I do think Preston Williams is not owned enough, leading that team for Miami at 3 straight weeks in just overall targets and snaps now. Jakeem Grant was hurt before the break. He's a slot receiver, so that's going to impact Albert Wilson a little bit more. So I think Williams on the outside, he does pose a threat. Dropped a touchdown this year, probably would have a lot more numbers, but somebody else. And then Auden Tate plays 100% of the snaps if he's still on your waiver, which I expect he is in most 10, 12-man leagues. 100% of the snaps, 22 targets now in 3 weeks. Those are some guys next to those Jets wide receivers on the top end. Dante Pettis as well, snaps coming up that stand out to me.
A lot of people dropped me Cole, hard man, when it came down to it. But if Sammy Watkins is going to miss time and Tyreek Hill is still going to be out, like you're going to want to own him and probably play him going forward, at least until those 2 guys are back.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, definitely get Hardman. Robinson, exact same thing. Robinson getting all the snaps out there. I didn't see Pringle. I think Pringle was second on the team in snaps. So I guess we'll get into what did you say earlier about the chip?
He is the heir to the chip fortune, Mr. Pringle.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised. It almost seems like a lot like Hodges coming into the game against Baltimore and looking better than Mason Rudolph did. Is that sometimes guys can come into games and the defenses just aren't prepared for them, so they can have this big strike ability. But it's not like Pringle was able to consistently keep this up. I think that any part of the Chiefs' offense is entirely startable on any given week if it's just the right week that these guys go off. But I still think that he would be behind the eight ball when I was trying to assess all of the options of the Chiefs' offense that I would want.
Yeah, that's completely fair. He's more of like a you already used your waiver, he's still there, and you need a wide receiver for the week type of play if he's still out there. So yeah, Hardman, if Hardman's available, go and get Hardman. Hardman's like a realistic flex option week in and week out. And yeah, if you have no Sammy and Tyreek's going to be out, definitely up there. I think there's a couple other interesting options. James Washington getting injured for Pittsburgh. We'll see the extent to that, but you did have Deontay Johnson playing 90+% of the snaps. The obvious concerns there are that now Devlin Hodges, third quarterback in like 5 weeks, is going to come in and play. We'll see how that shapes up. But somebody to hold wide receiver 2 role in this offense is always schemed very well. Again, quarterback's an issue. And Duke Williams is probably a very deep league option, but he was called off the practice squad, played second most snaps at wide receiver, only behind John Brown for Buffalo. He's a guy in the preseason that they like. They kept him on the team as one of the last guys on the bubble, caught all 4 targets, caught a touchdown. And what intrigued me the most was the slot percentage snaps on like Pro Football Focus. I didn't see them for Buffalo yet, but I want to see how often he was there, because from some of the tape, it looked like he was lining up in the slot a good amount, which would hurt Cole Beasley in 3 wide receiver sets. But I imagine that might have been in some 4 wide receiver sets. So he's a CFL guy. He went to Auburn, but Duke Williams is a guy that they're actually really high on, and that they wanted to scheme into this game off the practice squad, playing close to 80% of the snaps last week. Depends how much you trust Buffalo's offense, but if you're in 16-man league or something, he's somebody that you should go and grab.
I think it's one of these situations that maybe his role can emerge a little bit, but I think that he's just more of a detractor of the overall ceiling of Cole Beasley, and frankly puts him in the bucket of droppable players now. That if Beasley is not going to be someone who sees close to double-digit targets every single week like he had been doing from Josh Allen, then he's essentially useless when it comes down to it. Like someone like Jamison Crowder, who's been dropped en masse over the past few weeks, like Jamison Crowder is the better version of these 2 guys. Like if you combine these guys into one, I think that their stats are better, but since they're now going to be splitting them up a little bit and bumping each other off the field, that someone like Crowder is probably the superior option.
Yeah, definitely. Crowder over those guys, for sure, in my opinion, too.
All right, let's move to tight ends. Got a little bit to deal with here. James O'Shaughnessy, the Irish assassin, had been doing pretty well with Gardner Minshew, but he's done for the season with a torn ACL. Hunter Henry missed week 5, unlikely to play in week 6 or the near future, but he's starting to run again, so it does appear like he'll be back at some point. Hawkinson, keep an eye on him because he was basically dead the last time we saw him. He was getting carted off the field with a head injury. The Lions are now coming off of bye. They don't play until Monday night against the Packers, so if you're putting any faith into Hawkinson, you might want to have a backup plan in case he doesn't end up going, and you'd need to hear that pretty early in the week if that was going to be the case. He at least needs to pass protocol by Friday if you want to play him at all, and frankly, he's not like a top 10 player or anything this week, so maybe just find a better option. Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis both missed the week against the Patriots with a concussion. Ben Watson conditioning issues. He should return on Thursday, but maybe they give him the mini bye in order to work out and get himself back into game shape and get incorporated back into this offense. And Tyler Kroft for the Bills ended up missing the game with an ankle as well, leading to a Lee Smith touchdown, which who could have seen that coming? Who even knew Lee Smith was still in the league and not still closing in the 80s for the St. Louis Cardinals? Not me. I thought he was still on the Raiders, but here we are catching touchdowns. First one of the game, too, for the Bills against the Titans. Pickup-wise, I think there's 2 incredibly good options. You pick up Chris Herndon. I think he's the best. I think Gerald Everett's 1A, and after that, you're playing a crapshoot.
Yeah, completely agree. Big yikes for letting Lee Smith score. Not great at all. But Chris Herndon definitely number 1 right now for me. And season debut, and it couldn't come any better if Darnold is going to be back, because you'll get immediate production at a position that is just something like we've said this past week, just a crapshoot if you're not in those top tier of 3-4 wide receiver or tight ends up top. So I think Herndon is a guy that a lot of people, if you were like in the Sharp community or whatever, were drafting and just holding on to him for all these weeks. If he's on your waivers, go and grab him because he's a legitimate top 10 tight end who now you can play every single week. Gerald Everett, career game. He was tackled, I think, on like the 1 yard line, dropped the ball too, but that was the only thing that he did bad. Played over 80% of the snaps Thursday night. You have Brandon Cooks in the concussion protocol. So not only is this looking better for Everett in terms of just since really Tyler Higbee was injured, I believe week 3, really just separating himself in terms of snaps, red zone work. And now Everett potentially, if you have Cooks missing a week, is just going to take on even more of a role in this offense. And he looked like a wide receiver out there the way that they were using him. So something to keep an eye on for sure, and definitely a priority to pick up. Like you said, 2 really good tight ends. And Jeff Swaim, the only other thing that I was going to say, because, James O'Shaughnessy, IR, was averaging 4 targets a week. It's not like it's high upside, but again, if you need to stream a tight end, it's probably viable for a guy like Jeff Swaim to see 5 targets this week.
Yeah, I think I would actually still even rather stream someone like Tyler Higbee, knowing that everyone's sort of in on Everett now. Defenses can scheme for him, but they're still playing so many 2 tight end sets. You would think that even if Cooks was injured, they would bring in Josh Reynolds and go back to their 3 wide receiver sets, but they've really gotten away from that. So Higbee's going to be on the field for like 60% of the time, and he will end up seeing the lesser coverage that if I was just trying to stream even against the Niners, I think that's probably the move I would try to make for this week at least.
Yeah, that's fair. Everett, definitely the guy like over all those options too. And if Higbee's available, it's just tough for me to get to Higbee because all these guys, when it comes down to it, are going to be touchdown dependent. And I guess you do have to see, that's the risk that you're taking is, do you think Swaim is going to see a significant snap increase, or do you think just third string tight ends kind of fill into a role? Does Swaim go up from seeing 40-50% of snaps to now taking on and eating a lot of O'Shaughnessy's ownership? Because if you get him on the field for 70-80%, not nearly as athletic as a Gerald Everett, but it's at least more opportunity to get that, what you're really relying on is a touchdown.
Yeah, and in this situation, too, it just does seem like Minshew has eyes for DJ Chark, and he did for O'Shaughnessy as well. I played Swaim week 1. I thought he was a terrific value, and he was just absolutely brutal. Got his 1 red zone target, so maybe if you're just looking for a streamer, who's Jacksonville play this week? Jacksonville plays the Saints. Ugh. I mean, I'd probably just try to target the higher game. Like, if I'm streaming tight ends and if all realistically I'm looking for is trying to get a touchdown, even if I'm looking at tertiary options, I'd probably lean towards the higher game total game and basically just let that decide it for me. This Niners-Rams game projected up around 50 points already. I can see that depending on what happens in the Monday Nighter. Like, if the Browns put up 25, that game immediately goes to like 52 as a game total.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the biggest question mark for me is like, what do you do with Ben Watson? Like the conditioning thing's an issue. We haven't really seen tight ends involved, but you're playing with Ryan Izzo and Matt Lacoste. I think Ben Watson has a little bit, maybe more talent's not even the right word, experience for sure. Is he just old and washed up at this point? I guess I'll throw you that one. I don't know what to make of Ben Watson. I don't think he's worth much waivers, especially with these other guys here, but is scheme going to change for New England? I guess that's something else.
Tight ends caught 2 touchdowns against the Redskins. It's just it was highly unpredictable. The whole key where I would be willing to take the chance on Watson would be, 1, I don't have a tight end, or my tight end is hurt, or I have someone on bye, or I play in a 16-team league. And just having a tight end on the field, I think that he will end up playing the most snaps for the Patriots once he gets himself right. And it depends on this Dorsett injury. I guess we could have talked about Jacoby Meyer too, but that's just sort of a plug-and-play 1-week situation. With Watson, if he can develop this role with New England, we know that he already has an established connection with Brady from being there like 8 decades ago. They're both old men at this point, but he's just so goddamn smart that he'll be on the field more than Izzo and more than Matt Lacoste, the Lacostitute, solely because he's able to pick up schemes. He's able to adjust. He's able to really pick up on these blocking schemes in audible formats that just being on the field, knowing the history, especially red zone history of Brady and tight ends, that I think it's worth the upside if you miss out on these other guys or have no one else to play.
Yeah, completely agree. And if you're in this range already and your league is taking these guys, and it's probably just worth the dart throw at that point.
Quarterbacks, we saw Mason Rudolph go down. I don't know if he's been officially ruled out, but it looks like you mentioned, Hodges is going to be the starter for the Steelers. Mahomes hurts his ankle towards the end of the Sunday night game. He should be good to go. No return imminent for Trubisky, who's on bye this week. Drew Brees, Cam Newton, although Sam Darnold could return in week 6 against the Cowboys. We'll see how that ends up going, but keep an eye on him. And that's the reason that the Jets players are so high in the waiver wire rankings, because with Sam Darnold, they actually may have a pulse. They might actually be able to complete a pass that's more than 3 yards downfield. So we'll end up seeing how that goes, but eventually Darnold will return, and that will be a boost to all of the receiving options and even Le'Veon Bell into the Jets offense. The quarterback rankings for streamers I have for week 6, I got Kirk Cousins at number 1 at home against Philly in that putrid secondary. It's going to be hard to run the ball against them. Kyle Allen at Tampa, Rosen against Washington, Garoppolo versus the Rams, Colt McCoy against Miami, Delvin Hodge at home, on the road against the Chargers. I ended up inserting into that spot once I thought about it a bit more and really rewatched what he was able to do. And the fact that he's going to be able to run does provide a bit of a floor. Minshew's at home, but it's a tough matchup against the Saints, and Teddy B's on the road in a tougher matchup up against the Jags. I don't know if this is going to end up being the reorder, and I think that Kirk Cousins is legitimately the only guy that you kind of want to stream out of these guys, and that's only because of the matchup. I don't even really love Kirk Cousins that much, but is there any of the available options that you think you would turn to being like, oh yeah, I'll go with that guy? Because I did it with Andy Dalton last week, and eventually it worked itself out well, but it was looking like the week's worst call for a while.
Yeah, that first half was just atrocious, right? For me right now, I have very similar ranks. I have Cousins and then Kyle Allen and then Josh Rosen third. I think that Cousins makes sense for sure. It's a spot where Dalvin Cook's pretty much matchup proof at this point, but they could take him out of the game a little bit on the ground, which will then directly help Kirk Cousins in the passing game, having another talented guy being used there more. Kyle Allen is just fantastic because of the matchup, but I don't believe in Kyle Allen. Like, people saying that the offense looked better with Kyle Allen, and I actually kind of bought into that a little bit, but the last 2 weeks have kind of just shown that he's just not forcing the ball down the field, and when he does, it's not accurate. It's just pretty much let Christian McCaffrey do what he can, and for right now, that's holding up. So the matchup's really good. So if you're in a bind, Kyle Allen, I guess is okay. I might actually like Josh Rosen above Kyle Allen, though, as like a number 2. I believe in Josh Rosen. It's just, how can you get a much worse situation in your first 2 teams in the NFL? And I do like the talent that he has around him. Now, Kyle Allen has much more talent. Christian McCaffrey can just turn things to the house for you. But if you're just trying to rely on the quarterback's skill, I would put Josh Rosen there. But again, we're talking about guys that are on the waivers. So Cousins, I think Rosen 2 for me, and then Kyle Allen probably 3. Teddy Bridgewater, I think I would take him in that matchup if for some reason we want to go to that. But over Minshew, I just trust the head coach there more.
Defenses that you can stream on the Week 6 waiver wire. I've actually readjusted these a little bit now with the news of Tampa Bay going to be down to O-linemen. I've actually moved Carolina up to number 1 as they're still owned in fewer than 60% of leagues. And then everything else, you just bump them down 1. So Carolina number 1, Tampa number 2, Cleveland number 3, Washington, Dallas, Kansas City, the Chargers, and then San Francisco at the Rams. I would boost up the Cowboys, at the Jets. If we know that Falk is starting again this week, they would become the number 1 streaming defense, but that's the way that I'm shaking it out right now. Carolina and Tampa. I just think that you can give up points, as we've seen, and still be a good fantasy defense. Carolina showed that on Sunday, and I think they'll do that again with Tampa Bay.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. And then, like you said, Dallas would bump up a ton if Sam Darnold wasn't able to play. I do have, and it's like the 7th stream option, just the Packers defense still down here because, sure, they might not be good or showing holes against the pass and the run, but they're still generating so much pressure. So that usually is the big thing that I look for outside of just you're playing a really bad quarterback. So Packers are lower on the list if they're still available on your waivers, but all the ones that you mentioned, I wanted to say Baltimore, but I just don't think I trust them in any regard, even against Cincinnati.
I would play them against Cincinnati. They're still owned. Like they still get ownership based on name recognition. I believe they're still up around like 78% owned, even against like the Steelers. I guess the Steelers wasn't a bad matchup, so you could run the Ravens defense out again against them. And I think people will have no problems doing that. I can see them shaping up to be a very popular DraftKings defense this week as well. Let's discuss the Monday night game a little bit. If you go to Sal's YouTube page, Sal Vetri, and you can become one of the 10,000 and more subscribers up over there. He already has his showdown preview for DraftKings posted up there right now. But I think you hit it on the head that this is a really interesting showdown contest. Like, The line in the game right now is San Francisco -5. That's up from 3.5 as it was posted. The steam keeps coming in on San Francisco. I like the Browns still in this game. I think if I was going to make myself a captain, it would be Odell Beckham in this game, especially if they can get him utilized out of the slot a little bit. That he's always a game breaker that you would want. It's like when Tyreek Hill is active for the Chiefs. Just put him in your captain spot, because if anyone's going to break the game and break the slate and basically insert game genie, it's him. Beckham is still that guy for the Browns, even if he's going to be inconsistent. Like, you can't go into this thing thinking you're going to win, the $500,000 every single time, but you need to have that player in your captain spot if you ever are going to win it. But even if it's the backfield for the Niners or the receiving game for the Niners, like, I don't know who to play. No one knows who to play. So it makes it kind of intriguing.
Yeah, it makes it really intriguing. And if you are somebody who enters just a ton of lineups into these things, you can really get some interesting builds here. I was playing around a little bit with it earlier, but yeah, you mentioned it. Like, this is by far the craziest, I would say, like, news slate and just all different nuances to it that you have to look at. So if you look at the 49ers coming into this game, they have 5 wide receivers playing 25+% of the snaps. They're just rotating in for their best matchups, and it's worked for them so far. Running backs, we know they have like a 3-headed backfield. Jeff Wilson Jr.'s name's been popping up because of red zone touchdowns around the goal line. But they signed Jordan Matthews. I don't know if he suits up for this. I don't know if he sees the field, but that's just somebody else, if he does, and he's active come an hour and a half before. Another wide receiver that gets thrown into the mix of 20% snaps, lowering the ceiling for other guys. At the running back position, Tevin Coleman is due back, and as of like an hour ago, he's expected to be active tonight. So I would expect that to make Jeff Wilson Jr. not active. I don't know what that does for the running backs, though. I don't know if it just continues to make it a 50, 25, 25 split across the board. So very interesting on that side. And then there's news on the Browns side. The Browns, their wide receivers, Antonio Callaway is going to play his first game after missing suspension the first, 4 games of the season so far for them. So that's going to push down guys like Damian Ratley, not even going to be in play. Rashad Higgins, who's coming back and healthy, probably not going to be too much in play outside of you're hoping that you get a touchdown bink on low ownership. But they're saying that Callaway is going to be limited as well because of not conditioning is what they're calling it, but just endurance, which I don't know what the difference is for a guy who came into the preseason out of shape. Maybe they're just trying to be nice in the reports there. But yeah, it's just all over the place. So like usually I have a pool of, if you kind of just factor out kickers and defenses for skill position, I don't know, around 14, 15 players. Right now it's at 10, which doesn't sound like a big drop off, but when it's a 1-game slate, that's a pretty big drop off.
And you can even factor in, I think both defenses are very live in this game as well, just to generate, both can generate pressure. Both quarterbacks have been somewhat interception prone, especially pick 60 interception prone as well, that if you do need to save some money playing either defense, even in what you could project as a higher scoring game, knowing that they're both going to generate pressure, I don't hate them either. Like, you would think that San Francisco is probably in a better spot. They're the favored defense. That means they'll likely be going up against more passing attempts. But if I like the Browns, I think that using both Nick Chubb and the Browns defense over the running game and the defense for the 49ers may be a better way to go. I'm just looking at props right now, and there's just so many guys that aren't even available. I think the one that I like the best, and we talked about him as a potential pickup, the Niners have been talking him up a little bit, and it's Vig same on either side, but over under 27.5 yards for Dante Pettis, knowing that both Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward are not going to play here.
Oh, yeah, I like that over. And he's one of the guys that I have as like a yes in a player pool on that video. He's just way too cheap on this DraftKings price. And yeah, his snap counts are coming up. Like the rise and I guess overemphasized demise of Dante Pettis in like a 6-month span or 8-month span was just insane from the preseason. But yeah, he seems like he's slowly working his way back up. It seems like there's a cap at like 70% on how much these wide receivers can play, albeit a small sample of a quarter of the season. But yeah, wow. I mean, he could obviously get that in literally one target.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with it. Like, I was even looking at the other ones, like Deebo Samuel's up at 45.5, Kittle's at 70. It seems weirdly low. Like Richie James is also listed in the player props, and his receiving prop is 19.5. Like, you're not asking Dante Pettis, who's significantly better, to do not much more.
Yeah, Pettis is going to play at least 25% more snaps than James, probably more times than not tonight, and that's a low number. I guess a question, I don't have props up. Do you have a prop for Landry's receptions?
Yeah, Landry total receptions 5.5, but you get money in order, like you get plus 125 to bet it.
I like that. I was gonna guess 6.5 for his receptions tonight. So right now, San Fran their outsides are pretty good, but in the slot is where they've been. I guess borderline, not torched, but beat up. Godwin week 1, 353 and 1. Boyd torched them 10 for 122, and then Juju 3 for 81 and 1. And they also have given up other receptions out of the slot. Those are just primary players. So I do like Landry, who's coming off of a game. He's cleared to play a career high game and just running a ton of routes. 5.5. I would have guessed 6.5. I'm no lines maker. So don't come yelling if people play this, but I like that. I like that.
Yeah, the other one too, especially with Dontrell Hilliard active, that the receiving prop for Nick Chubb is 3.5. That seems high.
I was going to say, yeah, I didn't know where you were going to go with that. I was going to say that does seem high. Last week, like if you look at the snap counts last week, they don't matter too much because in the fourth quarter, Chubb was pretty much done. It was a game where Hilliard got to have garbage time and pick up some stats. But yeah, they made an emphasis to want to involve him in the receiving game more, and we've seen it here and there, but it's not something that every third down. I would expect Chubb to be running a ton of routes. Like we saw 2 weeks ago, he didn't come off the field. But that also doesn't translate to just having 4 catches.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Like the overall yardage for receiving props for someone like Chubb is probably a bit better because he could take one of those and end up with like 28 yards and all of a sudden he's over. Having either dump offs or designed routes for him, especially in games where they're underdogs. So let's say this game plays out like Vegas thinks it's going to play out, that they're in a lot of passing situations that would lean me towards him running more routes or potentially being more involved, but that would also lead me to think that he's playing fewer snaps. I think the better bet if you want to target Chubb, I'm looking right now, player rushing attempts over 19.5. I don't love that, but the yardage total for Nick Chubb right now is, where'd you go? 86.5 rushing yards, but you're getting even money to bet that because people have hammered the under. That I think that's probably your likeliest scenario rather than going 3.5 on like a total reception. I think the only prop that, I just played it. I'm playing that Dante Pettis prop. So over 27.5 is the official prop of the show today.
I like that. I'll back that. I'll put a endorsement behind that prop. So now we know it won't all be on you if it doesn't go right?
No, everything always falls on me. Although I'm not the one taking people's money and entering the bets. They just listen to career betting loser Pat Mayo and be like, this got to be the week. Pat's due. He's going to turn it around. Although I was 3-3 on props yesterday, and including one guy who got hurt in the first bit. I might have to start factoring it down to. I have only lost on one of them. I was going to say I have yet to lose, but I lost on a Chris Carson one in that game he got benched. But I had Madison under carries, Royce Freeman over carries. Like the carries for running backs, if you think you have a good grasp on how that game is going to go, I think that's a really soft market for props.
Yeah, it's like a niche within the niche because the props are already soft. And I think bookies usually, but whether it's just the books in general, they have such hard caps on these because they know they're not the greatest at setting them. So yeah, if you're like a niche within a niche and you're tracking those sorts of things, I think that's a really good way to kind of very few chances to take advantage of Vegas maybe, but have a career successful track record in that area.
Last week on the Waiver Wire show, I gave out the New England Patriots minus 14.5 as a fantastic bet, then failed to super lock it in because I'm an idiot and forget things. But we bet it right away, and that bet ended up winning and ended up closing at 16.5 when all was said and done. If you take a look at the spread board this week, there's not one that really leaps out to me, although Carolina's a 2.5-point favorite on the road against Tampa. We've talked about these Tampa injuries. I'm kind of intrigued by that, but I'm curious to see where that line goes throughout the week.
Yeah. It's tracking the injuries. They're already going to be down like 2 offensive linemen. So curious to see how it moves as well. That's interesting. I thought that, I guess Thursday Night Football, again, the Patriots opens as 14-point favorites, and quickly I'm seeing across the board just bet to 17 already. If you got it at 14, again, I would say that's a good bet now coming back home. One that stands out is it's late in the week, but Monday night, the Packers, Detroit coming on a bye, going to Green Bay. But seems like 5.5 to me seems like a good amount of points for the Packers to be getting. I would probably side with Detroit there as just sort of like a first look at this. But yeah, glancing up and down the board right now, not much stands out. The game that like is just a question to me in general, is it going to be a good game? Is it going to be low scoring? And seeing the line here is pick them in some spots. New Orleans and Jacksonville, I don't know what to make of that right now. I don't know if I'll more than likely later in the week have a stronger stance on it. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, you have a lot of confidence in this New Orleans team from the public, just in what Peyton and Teddy Bridgewater have done. Is this sort of a letdown spot going into Jacksonville? Jalen Ramsey being active for that game, seeing a specialist right now is obviously a big piece of it, but I don't know what to make of that as a pick 'em. It's surprising.
Yeah, I'm going to have to dig into that one more as the week goes along. I don't have really a lean on it either way. I think Tennessee getting points in Denver, they're getting 2.5. You can probably find that at 3 in some spots. I think that's the sort of team that Tennessee can go and beat. Like, they play better against finesse teams overall. However, Denver coming off a win, they finally get one. I don't think Tennessee's neither good or bad. They're just incredibly average. Yet the Broncos' run defense is so putrid that this just feels like Derrick Henry goes bananas in this game. Then you don't ask Mariota to do too much. Then all of a sudden, the Titans are winning. It's funny that they played the Bills this week. They're sort of like the minor league version of the Bills, and I think that wins against Denver. So I like that. And frankly, the Jets 8.5, getting 8.5 at home against Dallas. I know Dallas has looked bad the past few weeks, and you just think they go and steamroll the Jets. But this line feels like Darnold is starting in it. Like if Falk is starting in this game, this line's probably like 15. I think it probably even goes up because people love to bet the Cowboys. But like if you can get like +9, +9.5 with Darnold back, I actually kind of like the Jets.
Yeah, I like this too because you have to track Tyron Smith's ankle and Lyle Collins. But if you get Darnold back, and it seems like that, just the playmaking ability to keep it close, even backdoor this seems very good. But also, like the Jets last week were down C.J. Mosley, they were down Quinnen, and those guys are going to get healthier too and those are two guys up front in the front seven against what could be a team with their two best starting linemen out and more than likely one of them out. So that does seem like a lot of points.
The only 2 games for the DraftKings main slate that will be above 50 in terms of overall game total, as it stands right now. One, you have the game that everyone is going to be stacking, Texans at KC, 56 is the game total. The only other one that creeps up is Arizona and Atlanta at 52. That game, as someone who consistently plays the wrong Cardinals and the wrong Falcons, is whoever you think you should play in that game, just play the random other guys in that game because they'll be the ones who go off.
Yeah, like the Sanu this past week, Fitzgerald somehow is capped, not getting into the end zone. Yeah, those seem like the two spots that people are going to want to stack. While yeah, Houston and Kansas City seems like it's going to be a really good game, I would imagine, and just for fantasy purposes. But yeah, Atlanta, Arizona, there's going to be just tons of pieces in it. We'll see Kirk seems like his injury is going to be a little more long term. I have to check in on Damiere Byrd. But it seems like David Johnson, like this is what the plug and play. If David Johnson, as long as they're saying probable, fine. It's what the highest owned play on the slate against Atlanta.
I would think Austin Hooper might be the highest owned play against Arizona.
That's so true. Yeah, that's the other flow chart right now. And yeah, you had Eifert, like he failed last week, but he also had a touchdown or should have had a touchdown if Dalton hits him there. He was open in the end zone on just crossing into the middle of the field.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if he doesn't throw it at the defender instead of, but Eifert was all like, there's a couple that we got pass interfered with once. He dropped one, and eventually Auden Tate ended up getting the touchdown, but he dropped a touchdown on like the first drive of the game. It was just an incredibly frustrating game overall.
Yeah, I think Eifert also played like his lowest snap. So what I'm trying to look at is like, what's that like next tier game, I guess? I mean, I see a 48 spot on Cincy and Baltimore. Is this like a week that it's just Hollywood Brown week finally? I'm not sure
if he's good to go, like 48.5 Panthers and Bucks right now. And then it's like Seahawks and Browns, but that total is going to be adjusted after the Monday night game, I'm guessing. And then Niners and Rams. And that's another one that's going to be adjusted after the Monday nighter. That it's a really weird week. And it's not like it's the teams that we're missing on bye. You have the Bills who have a good defense, the Raiders who are just kind of middling in all things, the Colts they're really hard to project because they're sort of like the Niners in that way. You have your one or two pieces, then who knows as it pertains to them on offense. It could be, Pally Campbell coming back, or it could be Zach Pascal, or this week is Chester Rogers. You just never know. It could be a Jack Doyle week over an Eric Ebron week. But then you have the Bears defense also on bye. So you have two really stout defenses not playing at all, and especially not on the main slate that you think that there'd be more to pick on, but there's not.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's nothing in like nothing in like the 45 to 47 range. It's just low scoring games and like 48 and above, which is going to be odd. And yeah, we have a 10 game slate, which when we get to all that DraftKings stuff later in the week is is going to be just less options in general. And now you're going to have less options in less favorable spots, which just probably leads to even more ownership and chalk on those 250-point games.
Well, hopefully everyone's disenfranchised with the Ravens offense, because both Andrews and Brown went down in that game. Andrews ended up coming back, and Brown is probably just going to have the questionable tag all week. That hopefully, now that I've done it the past 2 weeks and it hasn't paid off, I'm just going to go back to Lamar, Andrews, Hollywood, and hope that it hits this time.
Yeah, you have to have your mindset the whole week as you're not going to go there. And in the back of your head, you're like, this is the week that they're going to go off. And then 5 minutes before lock, just change the entire lineup, get those Baltimore stacks in there. Mark Andrews is just phenomenal. Like, he's dealing with a foot injury that seems to be just limiting his play, and he's still hurdling like 2 dudes a game.
Is there any chance, we talked about Hooper, David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald probably gets the high ownership. Everyone is going to own Will Fuller this week, right?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, the price tag reflects, but it still doesn't come up all that much from what I was looking at. I'll probably still have interest in it. It's still a good matchup, but maybe the week to get away from it, probably the week to get and just pay up more for Hopkins here. There's just not much. Like, it's a very concentrated offense for this team. And if they're going to play more 12 personnel, I don't know if I trust those tight ends to roster them, put my money behind them. So yeah, they're the only option. So he still seems fine. Like, he just had a ton of targets. I don't feel like it drops off. But yeah, if the ownership comes in high, pivoting to Hopkins, pivoting to other players in the price range always makes sense, because he's a big boomer bust player, and he just had a big boom game.
All right. Sal Vetri, thanks for being on, dude. Plug your channel and tell everyone where they can watch you throughout the week.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. This was a ton of fun. So yeah, my channel is just Sal Vetri. I mean, I've transformed it into sort of, well, it's a YouTube channel, and then also now in podcast format, same type of thing as on YouTube, just strip the audio. So Sal Vetri, you just type that in, you'll find me on YouTube in podcast formats, Twitter at Sal Vetri DFS. And then I appear on Awesomo's show on their YouTube channel Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays at 11 a.m.
How does it feel full time being as busy as possible during football? Do you hate football more now?
No, so we were talking about this before the show. I don't hate it more now because I'm like kind of a spreadsheets guy, and kind of just, I'm like very in between of liking all the spreadsheet stuff and really enjoying doing content. So right now it's a nice balance. I'm concerned, not really concerned, but just curious at what it's going to be like come 3 weeks when I start to cover some NBA as well. I think the process will be down for NFL. But yeah, man, doing this is like a full-time job now is just phenomenal, and I just hope to do it as long as possible.
Well, congratulations on all your success. Everyone go subscribe to his YouTube channel. I mean, the first 10K, they're slow. The next 10K, let's make that pretty quick. So everyone go subscribe to Sal's YouTube channel right now. Go download his podcast and go follow him on Twitter at Sal Vetri as well. Thank you again for being here. Thanks for everyone who tuned in live. Congratulations to all the winners. And if you want to get into a draw for $20 DK, what you do is smash the like button for the episode, leave a DraftKings handle in the comment section, the live chat, not included, the actual comment section. Tell me which player in all of fantasy you would buy low on right now, the number one guy. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at the PME to get yourself into a draw for 20 DK bucks, and subscribe, rate, review, and download the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. 5-star review, DraftKings handle something nice about the show, and boom, you too will be in the draw for 20 DK bucks. Winners announced every Monday live, 1 p.m. Eastern time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. All of my content is up in the description of this video and podcast right now over on dkplaybook.com. If you just want to find the site to find everything, I got rankings tomorrow. I got DraftKings picks. Early on Wednesday, the Spreads Pick show has been bumped to Wednesday evening, at least tentatively. That's what we're going with right now. We'll see if Feinberg can squeeze himself out some time to come in and film, but that'll do it for me. Hope you enjoyed. Good luck in week 6. I'll see you next time.